The twin forces of technology and global competition have subtracted those jobs that once provided a foothold into the middle class, reduced the bargaining power of American workers. And our politics has suffered. Entrenched interests, those who benefit from an unjust status quo, resisted any government efforts to give working families a fair deal, marshaling an army of lobbyists and opinion makers to argue that minimum wage increases or stronger labor laws or taxes on the wealthy who could afford it just to fund crumbling schools, that all these things violated sound economic principles. We'd be told that growing inequality was a price for a growing economy, a measure of the free market, that greed was good and compassion ineffective, and those without jobs or health care had only themselves to blame. And then there were those elected officials who found it useful to practice the old politics of division, doing their best to convince middle-class Americans of a great untruth, that government was somehow itself to blame for their growing economic insecurity, that distant bureaucrats were taking their hard-earned dollars to benefit the welfare cheat or the illegal immigrant. And then, if we're honest with ourselves, we'll admit that during the course of 50 years, there were times when some of us, claiming to push for change, lost our way. The anguish of assassinations set off self-defeating riots. Legitimate grievances against police brutality tipped into excuse-making for criminal behavior. Racial politics could cut both ways, as the transformative message of unity and brotherhood was drowned out by the language of recrimination. And what had once been a call for equality of opportunity, the chance for all Americans to work hard and get ahead, was too often framed as a mere desire for government support, as if we had no agency in our own liberation, as if poverty was an excuse for not raising your child, and the bigotry of others was reason to give up on yourself. All of that history is how progress stalled. That's how hope was diverted. That's how our country remained divided. But the good news is, just as was true in 1963, we now have a choice. We can continue down our current path in which the gears of this great democracy grind to a halt and our children accept a life of lower expectations, where politics is a zero-sum game, where few do very well while struggling families of every race fight over a shrinking economic pie. That's one path. Or we can have the courage to change. The March on Washington teaches us that we are not trapped by the mistakes of history, that we are masters of our fate. But it also teaches us that the promise of this nation will only be kept when we work together. We'll have to reignite the embers of empathy and fellow feeling, the coalition of conscience that found expression in this place 50 years ago. And I believe that spirit is there, that truth force inside each of us. I see it when a white mother recognizes her own daughter in the face of a poor black child. I see it when the black youth thinks of his own grandfather in the dignified steps of an elderly white man. It's there when the native-born recognizing that striving spirit of the new immigrant. When the interracial couple connects the pain of a gay couple who are discriminated against and understands it as their own. That's where courage comes from. When we turn not from each other or on each other, but towards one another, and we find that we do not walk alone. That's where courage comes from. And with that courage, we can stand together for good jobs and just wages. With that courage, we can stand together for the right to health care in the richest nation on earth for every person. With that courage, we can stand together for the right of every child from the corners of Anacostia to the hills of Appalachia to get an education that stirs the mind and captures the spirit and prepares them for the world that awaits them. With that courage, we can feed the hungry and house the homeless and transform bleak wastelands of poverty into fields of commerce and promise. America, I know the road will be long, but I know we can get there. Yes, we will stumble, but I know we'll get back up. That's how a movement happens. That's how history bends. That's how when somebody is faint of heart, somebody else brings them along and says, come on, we're marching. There's a reason why so many who marched that day and in the days to come were young. For the young are unconstrained by habits of fear, unconstrained by the conventions of what is. They dare to dream differently, to imagine something better. And I am convinced that same imagination, the same hunger of purpose, stirs in this generation. We might not face the same dangers of 1963. But the fierce urgency of now remains. We may never duplicate the swelling crowds and dazzling procession of that day so long ago. No one can match King's brilliance, but the same flame that lit the heart of all who are willing to take a first step for justice, I know that flame remains. That tireless teacher who gets to class early and stays late and dips into her own pocket to buy supplies because she believes that every child is her charge, she's marching. That successful businessman who doesn't have to but pays his workers a fair wage and then offers a shot to a man, maybe an ex-con, who's down on his luck, he's marching. The mother who pours her love into her daughter so that she grows up with the confidence to walk through the same doors as anybody's son, she's marching. The father who realizes the most important job he'll ever have is raising his boy right, even if he didn't have a father, especially if he didn't have a father at home, he's marching. The battle-scarred veterans who devote themselves not only to helping their fellow warriors stand again and walk again and run again, but to keep serving their country when they come home, they are marching. Everyone who realizes what those glorious patriots knew on that day, that change does not come from Washington, but to Washington. The change has always been built on our willingness, we, the people, to take on the mantle of citizenship. You are marching. And that's the lesson of our past. That's the promise of tomorrow. That in the face of impossible odds, people who love their country can change it. And when millions of Americans of every race and every region, every faith and every station can join together in a spirit of brotherhood, then those mountains will be made low, and those rough places will be made plain, and those crooked places, they straighten out towards grace. And we will vindicate the faith of those who sacrifice so much and live up to the true meaning of our creed as one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That is the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, an African-American, on this 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. As you look at pictures on this mall of the thousands of people who have gathered here, the President, serious today, going deep, not only looking back and honoring the people who came before him, whose shoulders upon which he stands, but also giving some tough love, and also soul-searching and looking forward to the future of what we need to do in order to achieve not only Dr. King's dream, but beyond that, a quality of life for every single American. There is a former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, there, and also the King family in the crowd as well. I'm joined here on the podium on this great national mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial by Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who worked in the movement, and also CNN's Van Jones, a host of Crossfire. Congresswoman, he spoke to the people here, but he knew that speaking to the folks here, he was preaching to the choir. He was reaching beyond the people in Washington, and everyone, I say, every American should have been listening to this speech.
Don, you know, I started with that. Dr. King was a dreamer, but he believed in America. Today, President Obama spoke to the hope of America, and he is hopeful for America.
Yes.
As you look at this vast throng of humanity, the ones who came are clinging on to that hope.
In the rain.
In the rain. But the real challenge today is, as I said, for those Americans far and wide that are not here, what President Obama said to them was, we are one, we are united, we are the manifest of our own destiny. We have low valleys and high mountains. And as someone who worked for the SCLC, it is the same challenge that I would like to give, because as a member of Congress, we have a task to believe in Dr. King's dream and to implement it. And that's what the president has said: raise the minimum wage, educate our children, be fathers and mothers. He gave us a roadmap.
Yes, he did. He spoke to the poor. He spoke to African Americans specifically. He spoke to white Americans. He spoke to Democrats and Republicans.
All of them.
This was a far-reaching speech, Van Jones.
It was, and I feel, that he was beginning to move into the Johnson direction. In other words, some people say that he should be the heir of King. Well, King was a preacher. He's the heir of Lincoln. He's the heir of FDR. He's the heir of Johnson.
Right.
And he has to be evaluated. And I saw him reaching for that legacy. He spoke about issues of class. He talked about jobs. And he was willing to give some tough love to parts of the black community that are falling behind. But look at this beautiful, beautiful scene here. This beautiful family that's inspired the world. It's given black children something to aspire to. And now here comes Jimmy Carter.
Right.
A great man who, when he came on the scene, was a Southerner who understood the issues of race. And then
Southerner.
Bill Clinton.
Another Southerner, William Jefferson
great
Clinton.
presidents.
The
George
39th,
W. Bush
the
would be
42nd, and the 44th president of the United States.
If I might
on
say
stage.
also, the president took the challenge to speak to the Congress of the United States of America.
Yeah.
He is the visionary. The American people are the humanity. We are the architects. I want my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, I hope they are somewhere today listening not to divisiveness, but to hope, for them to come back and be joined by the president to be able to be the crafters of a better America,
Right.
and more educated America, a more improved America.
And to accomplish something.
To accomplish something together, unified as one.
And the person who can speak to that, as well as Van Jones, is CNN's Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer, you sat there, you listened to the speech. Just on a personal note, I have to say this is, for me, I enjoyed this speech by the president more than I've enjoyed any other, even the inauguration speech. This speech spoke to every single person in America, Wolf Blitzer.
Well, explain that, Don, and maybe Van wants to explain also, when you both suggested the president had some tough love in this speech for the African-American community. Be specific. What did he say that, in your